Hey everyone, it's Rachel. Today I'm going to share some useful and easy to memorize patterns on the guitar fretboard that will make it a lot easier and faster to navigate the fretboard and figure out where the notes are. If you haven't seen part 1 of this series and need a refresher on the names of the strings or how to figure out where the notes fall on the guitar without using patterns, I'd recommend checking out that video first, and I'll have that linked in the description. So just knowing the names of the open strings and the 12 notes that you can find on the guitar, you can start at any string and count up to find any note you want on any string, but that might be a little bit slow at first. But luckily, because of the way the guitar is laid out, you don't have to strictly memorize everything. There are patterns on the neck that will make it easier to find other notes once you just know one starting note. So these are the patterns I personally use the most when I'm finding my way around the guitar neck. For one, if you have any note that you know on the E or A strings, let's start with the 5th fret on the E string, which is an A, and then you move down 2 strings, and then down 2 frets, then you have its octave. So that is just another A in a higher register. And you can move the shape around anywhere starting from the E or A string as your bass note, so. Or you can find any octave this way starting from those 2 strings. Now this is super useful because if you know any starting note, you can find another instance of that note, and therefore you can more quickly figure out the notes around that other note. So if you know that this is an A, and therefore you know that this note is an A as well, then you know that this is an A sharp, and then this is a B, and so on. It's really easy to figure out the other notes around that starting note. Now for any note starting on the G or D strings, or the 3rd or 4th string, we can still apply a very similar pattern to find octaves. It just has to be modified a tiny bit because the B string is tuned differently from the rest of the guitar. The strings on the guitar are tuned primarily in fourths, but the interval from the G string to the B string, so the 3rd string to the 2nd string, is actually a 3rd. Now what this means technically isn't so important. I just wanted to call it out because you'll have to keep in mind when you're playing patterns across the B string that oftentimes they'll have to be shifted slightly to accommodate for the difference in tuning. So in this case, and in others like it, when we have a note that falls on or goes over the B string, we need to shift that note up half a step to compensate for this difference in tuning. So the pattern starting from the D and G strings is very similar. You just take a note on the string, and then you move down 2 frets, and then up 3 instead of 2. And then same thing for the G string, you just take your fret, go down 2, and then up 3. And then you have the same note, just higher. And then again, you can move this pattern anywhere you want on those 2 strings. So now on to another really useful pattern to memorize. If you take any note on the guitar fretboard, so let's just choose this one here, and you go 1 string down, and then 5 frets back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have the exact same note. Or another way to think about this, if you take any note on a higher string, and then you go back 1 string, and then down 5 frets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have the same note. Now this is true anywhere on the guitar except when you're just looking at the G and B strings together, because again, the B string is tuned differently than the rest of the guitar. So if you're looking at the G and B strings, you have to move 4 steps instead of 5. So if you have a note on the B string that you want to find on the G string, you just go to the G string and count up 4 frets instead of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you have the same note. And of course this can be applied in reverse. If you have a note on the G string and you want to find it on the B string, you just go to the B string and count back 4. But anywhere else on the guitar, it's always 5 frets. Now again, this is really useful because if you know where one note is, you can find it on another string and then find the notes around that note from there. I often use this to move a riff around the neck and make it easier to play, more comfortable to play. So if I'm playing it maybe higher on the neck, but I want to play it lower on the neck for some reason, you can use this to move that riff around. Now related to that pattern, another really useful thing to just memorize is that when you play the 5th fret on any string on the guitar other than the G string, because of the B string tuning, you get the next open string note. So that means when you play the 5th fret on the low E string, it's actually the same as the next open string, which is an A. And then this means that since D comes after A and the 5th fret corresponds to the open string, 5th fret on A is D, and then 5th fret on D is G. And then when you get to the G string, you have to move back a fret. So the 4th fret on G is B, and then the 5th fret on B is E. So if you have the names of the open strings memorized, which you should try to do, it makes it really easy to figure out what these notes are on the 5th and then 4th frets on your guitar. One other useful and related pattern you can just memorize here is that the 7th fret on the guitar is always going to be an octave higher of the previous string. So the 7th fret here on the A string we know is an E. And we can figure this out from the other patterns we talked about because we know that this is an E here, and if you count back 5 frets, you can find the same note. And so from this we also know that the 7th fret on the D string is an A, and the 7th fret on the G string is a D, and then on the B string we move it up a fret, and the 8th fret is a G. And yeah, it's just really useful to have this memorized to use as a starting point to finding other notes on the fretboard as well. So those are all the most common patterns that I personally use to navigate across the guitar fretboard more quickly and without having to strictly memorize every note on the fretboard. There are definitely more you can memorize, but these are just the ones I personally find most useful. So knowing just these patterns, it can be really quick to navigate around the fretboard, and let me show you an example of that. So let's say that I want to know what this note here is. Well, using one of the patterns we talked about, I know that this is an A, so this must be an A sharp. And then let's say from there we want to move around from this note. So we know that this is an A sharp, and then we know that this is an A sharp as well. And then from this note here, let's say that we want to find the nearest C. So we know that it goes A sharp, B, C, and then we want it to go up an octave. So we have C, and then this would be C here as well. And yeah, you can just navigate across the guitar like this pretty easily. If you want to, you can definitely try to memorize all the notes on the fretboard so you can just call it anyone at any time without having to do any extra thinking, and I think that'd be cool to do long term. But I think it's pretty common to just use these sorts of patterns to navigate the fretboard without having everything strictly memorized. So I hope this series was helpful in helping you to understand and better navigate your guitar's fretboard. This information has certainly helped me a lot with my guitar learning journey. One last thing, I just want to mention that I have a new t-shirt design right here available for sale on my merch website, and I'll have it linked in the description if you'd like to check it out. It's kind of a guitar galaxy. I actually made the design myself a while back, and you may have seen me wearing it in previous videos, but I hadn't put it up on my website until now. I also added a couple other new things like stickers and a drawstring bag if you're interested in checking those out as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.